I walked into a manufacturing plant where production managers were so proud of their utilization rates. Every machine was running at 80% or above. They were efficient. They were also shipping late on 40% of their orders. Here's what nobody had done: find the bottleneck. One machine, the constraint, was determining the output of the entire system. Every other machine running at 80% was building inventory that piled up in front of the bottleneck. They were efficiently producing extra waiting. Eliyahu Goldratt's theory of constraints would have fixed this in 30 days, but it took them 2 years and a consultant to figure it out. Today, we want to make sure that you don't need either of those. Hello, my name is Todd Hagopian, the original Stagnation Assassin, author of The Unfair Advantage and The Stagnation Assassin on Amazon.com. And today on the Stagnation Assassin MBA, we are going to take a look at the theory of constraints. I'm going to tell you exactly what the MBA program is going to tell you about this, what they're going to leave out, and what you actually need to know if you're running a real business in the real world. The TOC is the most immediately applicable operations tool in the MBA curriculum. It happens to be one of my favorite. It changed my life. It is underteached, underused, and when correctly applied, it is one of the fastest operational improvement methodologies available to any operator on the planet. So let's talk about the textbook version. Here's what the textbook says. And to be fair, it's not wrong at all. Eliyahu Goldratt introduced the theory of constraints in his 1984 novel, my absolute favorite book ever, The Goal, written with Jeff Cox. The framework argues that every system has at least one constraint, a bottleneck that limits the system's throughput. Improving anything other than that constraint improves absolutely nothing. It's brilliant. Goldratt's 5 focusing steps provide the operational methodology. 1. Identify the constraint. Find the bottleneck that limits system output. 2. Exploit the constraint. Get maximum output from it without additional investment. 3. Subordinate everything else. Adjust all other processes to support that constraint's maximum output. 4. Elevate the constraint. If the previous steps are insufficient, invest in increasing constraint capacity. And 5. Repeat. Once the constraint is broken, find the next one and restart the process. The companion metric framework replaced traditional cost accounting with 3 throughput accounting measures. Throughput, the rate at which a system generates money through sales; inventory, the money the system has invested in purchasing things that it intends to sell; and operating expense, money the system spends turning inventory into throughput. The goal is to maximize throughput while minimizing inventory and operating expense. Again, brilliant. The real world debrief, though, let's talk about where this holds water specifically. The TOC earns its tuition as the most direct operational improvement methodology that I have ever encountered. In manufacturing environments specifically, applying the 5 focusing steps consistently produces dramatic throughput improvements with minimal capital investment. The exploit step alone, getting maximum output from the existing constraint through scheduling, reduced setup time, and quality improvement at the bottleneck, typically produces 15 to 30% throughput improvement before any capital is spent at all, which is amazing. TOC also earns its tuition in non-manufacturing environments. I've applied constraint thinking to sales processes. Where is the bottleneck in this pipeline? Customer service operations, where is the bottleneck in resolution time? And product development, where is the bottleneck in time to market? The constraint is always there somewhere. Finding it is always the first and most important step. And remember, there is always a constraint. The only question is whether you found it consciously or whether it's found you through missed shipments and customer complaints. TOC also connects directly to the 80-20 matrix that we talked so much about. The constraint is where 100% of the system's output improvement lives. Everything else is noise until the constraint is fixed. Let's talk about the operating room where this breaks down. And remember, here is where the professors sit down and all of us operators stand up. TOC has 3 operational challenges. Challenge 1, constraint identification is actually harder than it sounds. In simple production environments with a single product, constraint is usually obvious. In complex environments with multiple products and shared resources and variable demand, identifying the true system constraint requires careful data analysis. Organizations frequently misidentify the constraint, focusing improvement efforts on a non constraint resource while the real bottleneck goes unaddressed is really bad. Challenge two, the subordinate step creates cultural resistance. Telling non constraint departments to reduce their efficiency, to slow down so they don't pile inventory in front of the constraint, violates every efficiency focused management instinct. Local efficiency metrics will actively work against the system optimization. This is why most TOC implementations fail. The cultural change required by step three is enormous. Subordination is the hardest step in TOC. Telling a high utilization department to slow down to protect the constraint requires a systems thinking culture that most organizations are just not capable of. Challenge three, constraints move. Once you've elevated a constraint and broken it, a new constraint emerges somewhere in the system. Organizations that celebrate breaking a constraint and then stop applying the 5 focusing steps will find that they've swapped one bottleneck for another without realizing it. Let's talk about the operator's upgrade. 3 moves to implement TOC most effectively. Move number 1, conduct a throughput analysis before any efficiency improvement initiative. Map the complete process from raw material to shipped product. Find where inventory is actually accumulating. That's your constraint. Everything else is just context. Move number 2, change your performance metrics to support constraint exploitation. Stop measuring utilization at non-constrained resources. It does not matter. Start measuring throughput, units shipped per day, as the primary operational performance metric. Buffer management, maintaining protective inventory before the constraint, should be a KPI. Move number 3, assign a constraint manager. Give one person explicit accountability for the performance and protection of the system constraint. That person's job is to ensure that the constraint never sits idle and is never starved of material. This is the more important than any other operational role in a throughput limited system. The Stagnation Assassin verdict here absolutely weaponized this. It's a brilliant theory. The theory of constraints is a legitimate, immediately applicable operational tool with a track record of dramatic performance improvement across manufacturing and service industries. The 5 focusing steps provide a clear, sequenced methodology. The throughput accounting framework is a superior decision-making tool for constrained systems. Every operator managing a production or service environment should master this theory. That's the theory of constraints, Goldratt's bottleneck gospel that still works better than most of what's come since him. For more on operational performance and turnaround methodology, grab The Unfair Advantage and Stagnation Assassin on Amazon. Remember to follow the Stagnation Assassin show and go to toddhagopian.com for the world's largest stagnation database. Remember, improving in non-constraint is just waste dressed up as productivity. Find the bottleneck. Fix the bottleneck. Everything else is just noise.